should pop up now. Could we move to the next slide, please? Before we begin this session, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge and express our gratitude for the land that we are on today. Whether you are an immigrant, born in Canada but belong to an immigrant family, or are a descendant of a settler, I think it is important that we all acknowledge that the land that we are on is borrowed land. The land that Sheridan Edge sits on is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Anishinaabe, the Métis, the Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. But as we meet on this virtual platform, I would encourage you all to reflect on whose land it is that you live and work on. I personally live on the Atawendron, Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee people's traditional territory, and I'm extremely grateful for this opportunity. And I acknowledge the blessing that it is to work on this land and to meet such wonderful people and the opportunities that I'm given. I would like to share a resource in the chat, which would help you all to see whose land it is that you are on. Besma, could we move to the next slide, please? Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Sanjana. So hi, everyone. Welcome to this workshop offered by Sheridan Edge. My name is Besma, and I'm one of the Edge staff. Given that this is a workshop that's both offered to the general public and the participants of our Social Impact Catalyst program, just wanted to briefly introduce what Edge is to those of you who might not be familiar with what we do. We are Sheridan College's entrepreneurship hub, and we're a vibrant community of people from all walks and backgrounds who believe that entrepreneurship can make a lasting change in society. We support changemakers as they explore entrepreneurial approaches to creating a more equitable and sustainable world. So what we primarily offer, we work with both we're open and accessible to both the Sheridan community and the general public, so you don't have to be associated with the college to access our services. We provide supports to early stage ventures who are interested in growing ideas that support the triple bottom line approach of people, planet, and profit. And we offer mentorship, learning programs, inclusive community, co-working spaces, and access to funding opportunities. We have been working virtually like everyone else around the globe for the past couple of years, but we do have physical spaces out of Sheridan's Mississauga campus, which is actually currently open and welcoming to any of you who are curious to kind of check it out if you would like to see what a co-working space in the heart of the city of Mississauga looks like, and you're welcome to come in and use it. We also have a space out of the Brampton campus that should be open sometime in the fall for those of you who might be interested in that space too. We also, given that we're part of an educational institute, we connect Sheridan students to opportunities to learn and work with startups and the opposite. So we also have opportunities to connect ventures with student opportunities or to work with students, whether it's through an academic related project or a non-academic aspect. And we collaborate with community partners to support impact entrepreneurs in the region. So that's just a brief introduction about Edge, but if anyone is interested or has any specific questions, you're welcome to message me directly. And I mean, we have other staff tonight, but you're welcome to send us any questions through the chat or via email. And back to Sanja.
So this session is a part of the Social Impact Catalyst series, and we have 2 more public sessions in this series. And if you would be interested to register for those, the link is in the chat. One of the sessions is the Legal Bootcamp for Startups, which is going to be on July 21st, which is a Thursday. And the other session is climate change with RBC experts, which is on July 26th, which is also on a Tuesday. So use the link in the chat to register for these sessions, and we'd love to see you there. The next slide, please. We also have a in-person lunch and lead session coming up with our very own Edge director, Renee, which will be conducted in the Edge Hub room B290 at the Sheridan HMC campus. The topic for the lunch and lead session is mindful leadership, a path to clarity and change. And I will put the link to register for that also in the chat. And we would love to see you there and join Renee as she talks about this wonderful topic. Could we move to the next slide, please? So it is my pleasure to introduce today's facilitators. First up, we have our very own Firuzan. She is the Marketing and Communications Manager at Sheridan Edge. Firuzan's expertise lies in building and launching marketing communication strategies and campaigns that generate massive exposure for global brands. As a content marketing expert, she has created thousands of marketing materials and knows the power of compelling content. In her capacity as a vice president and director at her previous roles, she has launched brand marketing engagements for Fortune 500 brands, directed global efforts to scale a niche brand, grown a global student base to 4,000 times its previous size, and worked with international companies in 3 cities, serving clients across Canada, US, and UK, among many other things. She is skilled across the full spectrum of marketing areas, from developing the marketing vision through go-to-market strategies, messaging, market research and positioning, managing marketing operations, media relations, etc. Her passion for marketing comes down to storytelling. She loves introducing a brand, connecting with an audience in a fresh way, and telling a brand story to generate buzz and engage the brand with its audience. Also joining us today, we have Dana, who is a marketer and a professor of digital marketing at Sheridan College. We are glad to have you with us today. And Dana is a self-starter marketing professional with 20 years of experience in telecommunications, software development, SaaS, and IT solutions. She has led teams to develop high-profile technology product launches and campaigns for both business-to-business and business-to-consumer initiatives. Throughout her career, she has also worked with a number of customer efficiency initiatives to boost retention, loyalty, and upsell. As a leader, she has become proficient in driving top-line results and bottom-line profits. Following multiple acquisitions, she has also spearheaded the transformation of a traditional technology company, resulting in a new brand identity and services, which increase their competitiveness in the cloud solutions market. So everyone here can rest assured that they are in good hands today, and they are with the digital marketing experts who will answer all their questions. And yes, you're in for a very exciting session. With that, I'd hand over the floor to the experts.
All right. Wow, I couldn't have done that better myself. Thank you, Sanjana. That's very kind of you. We appreciate everything you've done for us. And now that you've put us on a pedestal, we better deliver this really good workshop. Okay, so I'm super excited. Hi, I'm Firuzan, and Dana and I are super excited to be with you here today. And I'm going to kick off this learning session today. Give me 1 second to share my screen. And if you would be so kind as to indicate if you can see my screen, that would be phenomenal. Super, thank you very much. All right, so I have 2 screens. So on and off, I might look this way just to see if you guys are still with me, you folks are still with me. And that's what I'm doing. I'm not looking away from either of you. Okay, so I'm gonna start with, really quickly, we're going to start with an icebreaker. So if you could have any marketing superpower, what would it be? exercise your fingers now or unmute yourself and talk do whatever you see fit. But if you could have one marketing superpower, what would it be? Like, would it be, your thoughts converting directly into marketing action? Or would it be like you want to be the best storyteller in the world? What would you like to have as a superpower in marketing? I am going to quickly take a look on the other side to see what we have in the chat and read them out. All right, definitely high social media engagement rates. Yes, Zara, I'm with you. Always be relevant. Yes, definitely. That's a good one. And then we have being able to get my product in front of everyone who would be interested in it. That's fantastic, Andrew. Thank you. Any more? Any more? Come on, exercise your brains and your fingers. Always being engaging. Love that, Alex. Yes. So all of these and more, keeping people's attention, fantastic. Thank you, Hannah. All of these and more is something that we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to quickly move into what is marketing. So if I tell you what is marketing, I'd love to maybe hear from you what you think marketing is before us telling you what it is. But before that, let me just set some expectations for our session. So we're going to talk about what marketing is. We're then going to move into integrated marketing. I'm going to share a model called the PESO model with you. And then, Dana is going to talk about the audience, knowing your audience, market segmentation. We're going to talk a little bit about integrated marketing content. We're going to talk a lot about storytelling, social media marketing and listening, and then we're going to do some Q&A. Now, it looks to me that this agenda is a little bit not exactly how the presentation is. So if you see things coming in a different order, no worries, we haven't skipped anything. We'll get to everything, okay? So a lot of people, when we talk of marketing, think of marketing as something to do with selling. But I'd love to tell you that both marketing and selling are two different industries. I mean, they're completely different. As far as marketing is concerned, marketing is not about selling at all. Marketing is an act of service. And it's a generous act of actually helping somebody solve a problem. What does that mean? It means that you're never going to be able to force someone to buy a product. People will only buy what they want to buy. What our jobs as marketers or founders of companies and brands is to bring the brand, the company, the venture, the product, whatever it is, bring that to the right audience. When you bring it to the right audience, the audience is already seeking it. And if your audience is already seeking that venture, that brand, that product, that service, then it becomes an act of service to bring it to your audience and say, hey, look, here's what you were looking for. This addresses 3 or 4 pain areas that you're looking to solve. And this can help you do this, that, and the other. Therefore, you're actually, in a sense, adding to somebody's life when you're marketing. You're not selling them anything. So when we talk about marketing, we talk about integrated marketing today. And the reason we talk about integrated marketing is because you and I receive almost about 10,000 marketing messages a day. And that is already way too much. There's no way our Neanderthal brain can actually keep a track of those messages. It's impossible because our brains are not wired to remember that much information. Our brains are selective. So our brains only remember 4% of the information that is thrown at us. And therefore, this term integrated marketing came to be, born because what marketers realized is that your brand audience needs to see your messaging between 5 to 7 times to even remember the name of your brand or to remember what it's for. So in order to expose your target audience to your message 5 to 7 times, you bring together all the channels of marketing that you're using and then create that level of exposure. So How would that, so for a big brand, you might think, okay, if you're a big brand like Coca-Cola or Pepsi, then you'll be on television, you'll be on social media, you'll be having so many different ways in which, you know, like billboards and magazine ads, and you're in the newspapers and you're in press releases, so on and so forth, right? But what can small brands do? But today, because we have so much social media marketing that is available, smaller brands, even startup brands, can come to their audience directly into their mailboxes. It can go in directly into your audience feeds. So therefore, exposing your audience 5 to 7 times to your message becomes really easy, especially when you have an integrated strategy. But what does that integrated strategy mean? It means that you deliver one unified brand message across all marketing platforms, right? So for instance, if I want to deliver a message about Edge doing a digital marketing workshop, then I'm going to put it in our newsletter. I'm going to put it on all our social media channels from Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And then I'm going to make sure that they're announced in every workshop. I'm going to put that after every Eventbrite. Any email you receive will have it. And that becomes an integrated strategy. Although I don't have any television or radio, I can still get to you through those channels. And that is what integrated marketing means. And why do you need to do it? You need to do it because it builds brand awareness and you can educate customers about your brand very quickly. You can very quickly reach a wider audience because when you create marketing content campaigns, they're easier to share. It becomes top of mind because you see it on multiple channels and you hear about it multiple times. And over time, it helps you build brand loyalty, trust, and thought leadership because you are seen on multiple channels, especially if your brand is educating about something. It also saves a lot of money because you can use and reuse and repurpose assets. So if you create one graphic, you can use the same graphic in your newsletter, in your Eventbrite, on your LinkedIn, on your Instagram, etc., etc. And it provides flexibility because you can experiment with your different marketing tactics, right? So that is why integrated marketing becomes very important. If you have any questions so far, I am going to look at the chat really quickly. And if you do, I could address them. Okay, no questions so far. Very good. Cherise, sorry, she's just waiting to enter. Wonderful. So now we're going to take a look at something that is a model that all marketers use, okay? And it's called the PESO model. What is PESO? P stands for paid, E stands for earned, S stands for shared, and O stands for owned media. If you are marketing anything at different stages in the journey of your brand or your product or your company or your venture, you will require these 4 categories of, how shall I say, these are like categorizations of the activities or tactics you can use in marketing. So let's look at what is paid media, okay? Well, actually, you know what? I'm going to start with owned media. And the reason I'm starting with owned media is because it's the easiest for all marketers to do. Why? Because you own that. You create it yourself and you own all of that. So owned media typically is any kind of content that you create. So where will this content live? It'll live on your website. It'll live in social media. It will live in your newsletters. It could be videos. It could be webinars. It could be visual content, podcasts, audio. It could be anything that you own and that you create. Larger companies will also use brand ambassadors like celebrities to create own media. And they will use customer stories as well, like testimonials, right? They will also use employee stories or staff stories. For instance, if you go on a Starbucks Facebook page, you will often see quotes from Starbucks employees all over the world, right? And it's very interesting and engaging. You can create a lot of interesting content that way, right? And that is owned media. And why is it owned? It's because you own it. You can do whatever you like with that, right? And that is owned media. Wonderful. Now, if there's owned media, then there is something also called earned media. And I'm going into earned media is because this is something you don't own, but you will earn because of your relationships. So for instance, if you will earn media when you get mentions. So what if your brand got covered in a media article? What if some influencer tagged you and mentioned you? Your brand was so fabulous. Say for instance, was I'll just look at one of the names here. Okay, I'll say Hannah. Okay, Hannah has an amazing venture, and Edge decides to put it in a feature story on the Edge website, right? And that is not that's not owned media by Hannah. It's earned. She has earned it because somebody else created it for her. But because of her good work, she has earned it, right? So you see the difference. And earned media, one of the most important things that you can ever have from earned media is word of mouth. How does word of mouth work? Okay. For instance, if I want to eat out, I will go to Google and I will Google restaurants near me, and then I will choose based on the ratings and all the reviews. That is earned media for that restaurant, right? They have earned it through their work. And that is peer-to-peer marketing. I want to know what my peers think. I don't want to know what that brand is saying. If I want to buy a mobile phone, I just don't want to go and buy Apple for the sake of buying Apple. I want to buy it because I want to know what the features are and how others are using it. Similarly, you can earn media through bloggers. Investors might put something up about you, etc., right? And then what is shared media? Shared media is created in sharing. So when you work with, say when businesses work together, or when brands work with sub-brands. So in our case, we are under the giant umbrella of Sheridan. Edge is a brand, but it's under Sheridan's bigger brand. So when Sheridan and Edge work together and we put out all of our content, we are expanding our community, and that is called shared media because we're sharing it. But shared media could also mean partnerships. So suppose if we worked with another incubator, let's say iCube from the University of Toronto. So when iCube and Edge put out things together, that is also a partnership. Shared media could be many other forms. For instance, you could receive shared media through social monitoring. When people are saying good things about you, positive things about you, then that is shared media as well, right? And then last but not the least is paid media. Paid media is exactly what it sounds like. When you reach into your wallet and put your money on the table to buy media, that is paid media. So you buy leads, you do email marketing, you do affiliate branding, you do inbound marketing. Any activity that you pay for is called paid media. Now, at any given point of time in a brand's life cycle, you will use all of these four medias in some kind of, how do you say? Ooh, I'm blanking out on the word. What I mean to say, in some kind of combination, that's what I meant to say. However, there will also be phases in the growth of a brand's journey where you will only use one or two of these in the model. So what I'd like you to do right now is take a moment of reflection, okay? And maybe reflect on your brand, on your business, on your venture, and think of the peso model and think about which of these will you use at this point in your brand's journey to tell your story. So we're going to take a 5-minute break right now, and I'd love for you to pull out a pen and paper and look at what we have right here. I'm going to keep it up here for you to see, and think about which aspects of the peso model would you use right now when your brand is in its initial stages. You know, you're in a startup mode. So what will you use now? And then maybe think 6 or 8 or 10 months down the line, if that would change, would you use something else, right? And then maybe we can have 1 or 2 people share. So I'm going to be silent for the next 5 minutes while you take a look at this model, and you can then decide what you're going to use for your ventures, okay? I see a question in the chat. It says, what does it mean to buy leads? We will answer that towards the end of the session, if that's okay, Hannah, right? We'll answer that. But maybe in a nutshell, you know, it's like to buy, and if you buy an email list, or, you know, you want to send email to a particular audience, and you go to Facebook and then you say, okay, I want to target moms who are interested in exercise and who, you know, have toddlers from 1 to 3 years of age. Now, all those people, when you run that ad, become your leads. Okay, I hope that answers your question. So we'll take 5 minutes and then we'll ask somebody to share what they think they will use right now and maybe 8 to 10 months down the line from this peso model. Okay. And if you have any questions, let me know.
Firazan, there's another question in the chat.
Okay. Yeah.
Benjamin asked, so if someone were to partner, yeah.
Okay, so if someone were to partner with a TikTok influencer and have that awareness and have that influencer spread awareness for their brand, then that's earned media. Okay, you tell me, Benjamin, because what kind of partnership is it? If that partnership involves moolah, money, then will it be earned media? Have you earned it or have you paid for it? So it really depends on the dynamics of that partnership. If they partnered with, if they partnered with the influencer and in return for any publicity, the influencer is also getting publicity on their channel, then it's shared media. It's not earned media, right? If you paid for it, then it's paid media. But if the influencer doesn't know about you, suddenly comes across your brand and says, oh my God, wow, I don't know, but I found these Zoop's mini naturals that I now feed my puppy every day and I love it. Then yes, it's earned media because they didn't know about you, right? Does that make sense? Okay, let's read some responses. So Stephanie says, I'm too far off from launching, so none quite right now, but quietly working on content for website and social media. Very good, Stephanie. And I love the fact that you've put in all of this content. What I'd love to say to you is it's never too early to work with the peso model, because at the end of the day, you have started working on owned media, right? Your website content, your social media, your newsletters, your videos, this is all owned because you own it. And when you put it out there, and people start picking it up and tagging you and talking about you, then it becomes earned media, which you've already mentioned. Fantastic. And then at some point, you'll probably buy Google Ads. Love it. Great. Thank you, Stephanie. That was fabulous. So everyone, where are we right now? Is there anyone else apart from Stephanie who would like to talk a little bit about what they're doing right now or what they could be doing from the peso model? I've lost my chat. There it is. Anyone else would like to share? You can unmute yourself. Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so right now I'm not really doing too much, but I know in the future, based off like my demographic, I will most likely need to do some earned media in terms of media relations, because my target market is kind of like families, like head of families, so moms essentially. And so earned media is going to be very relevant towards that target market, as well as owned media in the form of content marketing towards them, probably on like Facebook as their main source, and then shared media through kind of partnerships that I could potentially do with brands or influencers who are in the mom sphere, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes complete sense.
Yeah.
And once your brand is out there and people start using it and reviewing it, then you will have more media that will have mentions of your brand, and you'll start building a community. And when you actually start building a community, and you'll have loyalists, you'll have brand ambassadors, and they will generate content for you. And then you'll also have some people who might not like what you're doing, and they become detractors, and that's okay, because every brand has that. But when you move into that space, that is when your community is becoming vibrant, it's kicking off, and you're, using a combination of earned, share, and owned media. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no,
Right?
that makes a lot of sense.
All right, super. So we're going to move forward, and thank you to Stephanie and Alex for sharing. So, oops, I'm having a little trouble with my, oh, great. So we've done the reflection. And after this reflection, what I'd love for you to think about is your audience. Because as this slide says, not everybody is your customer. And so now we know what kind of media we're going to use. So I'm going to hand this over to my brilliant colleague, Dana, to take you through the rest of the slides. So give me a moment, and I'm going to stop sharing so she can put her screen on. There you go.
Hi, everyone. I am just going to get my sharing started. It's a few clicks away here, so hopefully everyone can see. Yeah, okay, perfect. Oops. Trying to get it into the, there we go. Okay, now I've lost everyone's, okay. So it is a pleasure to be here, and Fruzen, I loved listening to you, and I hope that I can, add as much value as you did. But it was a really great start. And I think, just starting this conversation, this topic is huge. And so we've really tried to focus on the key elements to really help you guys get started, depending on which stage of your journey you're at in terms of your business. So I want to start off with, and I think it's common sense that everyone can't be your customer, but how do we internalize this? And we really need to think about this, because our gut, as someone who's starting out on a business, or even just a marketer in a large business, wants to go and target everyone. And you'll see as we go through this conversation, and then we start to talk about this, that it's really impossible to actually target everyone, and you will waste your marketing efforts. So when we are marketing, especially with small budgets, we want to be very focused and very efficient. And we want to create a conversation that is both meaningful and lasting. So I'm going to show you this video. I have to share my screen again to show you this video. So just give me a second. But as we go through this is an ad for Apple. I want you guys to think about, who are they targeting, and just throw it in the chat. Throw it in the chat whenever you're ready, okay? So I'm just, give me a second with a few things up here. Here we go.
Felix? Name, Felix. Date of birth, November 5th, 1986. Tracking current location. Can I have a taste of your ice cream?
Here's what you spent last night.
Crumbs from your table. Can I interfere in your crisis? Can you hear those people behind
This will
me?
help with the itching.
Taste of your ice cream. Can I lick the crumbs from your table? Your own business. Why don't you mind your own business? Why don't you mind your own business?
Okay, so as I I go back to my slides here, if you guys can just pop it in the chat, who do you think Apple was targeting? And I'm just going to look back at the chat. Okay, people who are worried about sharing their data, oh, for sure. I mean, you know, we hear all sorts of things in the media now about data being leaked, and we all should be so concerned. Let me see, privacy conscious users, exactly. This is for your brother. You know, it's so interesting, Hannah, that you picked out right away that your brother is a key target for this. And you might not be, or you might be, but you knew right away that your brother would totally align with this. So that's actually kind of interesting. And there's probably a whole profile to who your brother is, right? There's the demographics, the, you know, how he uses technology, what his interests are. So you think about all of that and how that relates. And so this video or this commercial was very intentional on, you know, from iPhone. And they're really picking on some of those kind of pain points that we all have. We may not all have it, but there are some of us that are a little bit more worried than others. I'm one of them. Although I don't have an iPhone, I have an Android. Okay, let me see. Mainly younger people, I'm guessing. Yeah, well, you can see the profiles of the people that they use. Postgraduate males who frequent cafes, totally could be. And you can see how and thank you everyone for putting this into the chat, because you can see how deep we can all get and who this profile could be for this ad. Okay, love the conversation. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to move on. Anything last minute that you guys want to add? Okay. So as you guys are moving on in your journey, you know, there are definitely building blocks to building your strategy, your business strategy. And whether you've nailed all of these or not, you know, you'll get there. It is important. We don't have a lot of time today, so we're going to be very laser focused on our discussion today. And so what I want you guys to focus on is the target audience. And I thought it was so interesting, Alex, how you had mentioned your target is, and I don't even know what your product is, I'm going to look it up after, but you're targeting moms. That is very focused, right? And so I want you to think about, as we go through this discussion, think about who you're, you know, the ideal profile of what you're like. You're already ahead. What's that ideal profile of the mom, right? So we'll discuss that, and I want you to think about it, and definitely you can unmic yourself if you have any if you want to add in as well. Okay, so you know, we all know we can't target everyone, and so products definitely it's impossible to target every single person. And so when we look at, I would say, you know, most of us drink water. I would say if I had to guess, the majority of us drink water, whether we drink tap water or we drink Nestle or Dasani or Evian. That's a whole other thing, right? And so you have the difference of the people maybe who are the tap water drinkers versus the bottled water drinkers. And I actually thought it was quite interesting. And I found this study that was conducted a couple of years ago, but it was the majority of consumers who use bottled water are actually younger, which is interesting, in between the ages of 35 to 44. And so this was a report that was done by the beverage industry. But why is this important? Because it can have an impact on how they market the product in terms of the packaging and the messaging, the colors. So there's so, you know, we can go on and on. There's so many things that we have to think about. But I'm sure that each and every one of you, if you are water drinkers, you know, you could probably fit yourself into possibly one of these categories. You know, we don't only look at maybe the taste, but there's also price is also something else that we consider. So what we do is, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but this is how we would segment out our market. So if we look at that study in the beverage industry, and when you're thinking about segmenting your market, you have to do your research. It is essential. There's so many research reports about different industries. So you want to use that in order to define who your customer is. There's a little bit of, you've got to do your research, but then also you start to, so you do the desk research, but then also you do that practical research as well by speaking to people, potential customers, family and friends. But it's getting a little bit ahead of ourselves right now. You want to make sure that when you look at your audience, you cannot target everyone. There's a specific market for every product and a specific target audience. So you have to think about segmentation. And when you think about segmentation, we could have a whole session on this, but we want to look at different aspects of geographic. Is your product a local product? Maybe it's just GTA, or are you focusing on your audience is Ontario, or maybe even outside of Canada. These are things that you have to think about, because you don't want to go too large if you actually can't support that audience. So there's we think about logistics as well, but then we have the demographics. And Alex, when you're thinking about moms, is that you might even want to further segment, is it new moms or moms with teenagers? What does that actually look like? So just start, or that could all just be one segment, but you have to think about your product and the needs. So just a couple things to think about. Then we, in terms of demographics, we think about things like income, very relevant, because can these individuals afford your product? What's the right price range in order to maybe target new moms, if that's your target? Education, ethnicity. Then we go into the psychographics. Hannah mentioned her brother would be like the perfect candidate for that product, for the iPhone, because of security. Well, maybe there is some, technology habits. There might be something underneath that from a psychographic perspective. So you need to think about that, the usage, the lifestyle. And then we talk about the behavioristics. And what I really want to focus on is the key aspect that I put in red is, what are the product benefits sought? So what are the pain points that your potential customer has, and what are they looking for to solve their problem? So if Hannah's brother is, and Hannah, I don't mean to pick on you, but I love that you actually identified your brother as someone who is possibly concerned about their privacy and security. Well, you can see how the iPhone in that one particular commercial really focused almost on one feature and functionality, which is privacy and security. There's, as we know, iPhone users, there's tons of amazing features and functionality, but they focused on one because they knew that it would hit sort of this pain point. So you want to sort of take a step back and make sure that you've considered all of these aspects, this criteria, in terms of your segmentation. So I would like to do a group activity, maybe about 5 to 10 minutes. And really, if you can get into your groups, I think it would be an interesting conversation just to talk about, okay, so where are you at in terms of, segmenting your audience? Who are you targeting? And make sure, ask each other questions, because I think, coming into, some of you have businesses and some of you don't, but you all have great ideas. And you can provide feedback from a completely unbiased, different perspective as well. So let's take, so Sanjana's going to put you into groups, and let's take 5 to 10 minutes. I'm just looking at my clock here, and to have that conversation. And we can, if you actually, maybe what I'll do is I'll move back to the previous slide, just so you can take a look and you can reference this if you need to.
You should all be getting a invite to a breakout room. Just accept the invite and you'll be sent to the relevant breakout groups.
Okay, we're all back. Yes. Okay, so how was it? Does anyone want to share some details about who their target audience is, the experience of going through market segmentation, any new insights you learned? I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but we would love to hear from you.
I can go a bit more in detail.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, like mine would be moms, but I guess to go more in depth, it would be moms who live in urban suburban areas, usually aged around 33 to about 48, in that range. They are married, could be single, but most likely married. Making probably about, give or take, like 60 to 90,000. They may, in terms of education, I don't really know, like I don't think it necessarily plays a factor. They're most likely immigrants of some form. They have at least like 2 to about 4 kids, and they're living a more standard suburban lifestyle, and their habits are more cost driven, but also because they are in a 2-people marriage, they are more financially able to make decisions based off of social movements. So I think that's like a secondary factor for them.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's probably it.
So Alex, thank you so much for sharing this, because you really dug deep into really understanding, getting down even into the persona level, which we're not discussing in this session, but and we could share some resources maybe after, if you want to look at developing personas as well. That's a whole other discussion, but I think you have a really good sense and a good idea of who you're targeting and the needs and the wants. As you were describing it, I sort of had this picture in my mind of what this mom actually looks like, and not just looks, I mean, in terms of, from the demographic, the psychographic. And so very well done. And you'll see as we start to get into, actually, this is a good segue for Susan's going to talk about content and storytelling. And I want you to think about that profile of that mom as we're going through the next phase of this workshop, which is Susan's going to talk about storytelling. Oh, I have to unshare, right?
Super. Thank you so much, Dana. That was perfect. And I'm going to quickly share my screen. If you could let me know. Okay, super. Thank you, Sanjana. Right. So we're going to talk a little bit about the power of marketing and where that comes from, right? So marketing, think of marketing as a car. And then what's that engine that's driving marketing? And that's what we're going to talk about right now. So the aim of marketing is to make selling superfluous. And I love this quote because a lot of, even when I have my own digital marketing agency, I find it really hard to, constantly go pitch myself and network because it doesn't come easily to me, but when I put myself in the mode of service, when I know what somebody needs, it becomes far more easier for me to talk about the story, about my brand and the services that I offer in my marketing agency. And that makes it so much more easier for me to tell somebody about what I do in my digital marketing agency. But even before this, when I worked for a marketing agency and I went to pitch for brands, and I've pitched for brands all over the world, I realized that what really would close that deal with the client was the story that we told when we were pitching. And that story was not just about who we were and what we could do, but also about how we saw their brand and what we could help others to see about their brand, their product, their service, and how we could tell that story, right? And so that's what good marketing does. It makes selling superfluous. You don't need to sell when you can evoke emotions, when you can connect to somebody at that deep level, right? So first, let's talk about what's content. So what can you, and I'm going to keep my screen this way, maybe change it to slideshow mode. It's easier for you to see. So what is content? So content is anything and everything that you use to communicate. And that communication could be for any reason. It could be to educate people about your product or service. It could be to influence somebody in their buying journey to choose you over something else. It could be just about informing people. It could be about expressing your opinion. And it could be about sparking a conversation. Content is any piece of communication that you put out there. And therefore, when you're talking on behalf of your brand or your venture or your product or service, you need to think of every piece of content with an objective. No words are just, there are no words that you can just use. Each bit of it must have meaning and purpose behind it. And you will use channels like digital marketing, which is your website, content marketing, social media. You will use advertising at some point or the other. Bigger brands use direct marketing campaigns. So you will, those are normally postcards or emails or texts that you receive. You know all about celebrity and influencer marketing. I don't have to tell you. Public relations, sales promotions, event marketing, sponsorships, trade promotions, you name it. And in every activity where you put your product or service before a customer, what you're doing is content marketing, right? And what is content marketing assets? It's any kind of content that you create. So anything to do with blog posts, social media posts, case studies, white papers, podcasts, reports, webinars, ebooks, videos, all of this is content. But there is one type of content called pillar content, which is absolutely important. Pillar content is basically a piece of content that tells you everything comprehensively about one topic. And from that bit of pillar content, you can build thousands of pieces of smaller content. Normally, pillar content is seen as a website where you would put all the information comprehensively about a product or a service, and then you would pull information as needed for slide decks, marketing presentations, VC, venture capitalist pitch presentations, ebooks, blog posts, etc. Okay. And what is visual assets? Visual assets are logos, social media graphics, infographics, any kind of graphics that you produce. And all of this, videos, graphics, copy, content, all of this falls under the umbrella of content for marketers. And therefore, it becomes very important that you also have an integrated marketing content strategy, because integrated marketing content becomes your primary means to achieve your business goal. What is that story you're going to tell your audience, and how is it going to move your audience from point A to point B, right? As I said before, you are never going to be able to force somebody to change their mind. You're never going to be able to force somebody to buy a product or a service. All you can do as a good marketer is find the right people who need your product and services, and then tell them the right story about your product and service, right? And therefore, it becomes a primary goal to achieve your business, primary means to achieve your business goal. It also, integrated marketing content also means that the brand experience across channels is consistent. So the visual identity is the same. You can't have one logo in one place and another logo in another place. People won't recognize your brand. So that needs to be consistent. The brand colors, the fonts, the font sizes, the images that you use need to all remain consistent. And that is what builds your brand identity. And the purpose is to communicate the same message through various channels in a manner that it enables our target audience to accelerate themselves through the purchasing process, okay, and choose us. So the purpose of your content is not to sell. The purpose of your content is to provide your customer information at every journey in their buying process so that they have enough information to buy or choose you or your brand or your product, right, at any given point of time. And it therefore becomes the foundation. Your content, your integrated marketing content strategy becomes the foundation in the attract and delight stages in a buyer's journey. So a customer's journey starts with, at the very base, starts with attraction. So you attract somebody to your product. But once you attract them to your product, customers are very savvy today. They're not just going to buy your product because they see it. They're not going to, stumble upon Firuzan and say, hey, she looks like a nice human being. Let me get her to build my website. No, they're not. They're going to say, hey, let me look at her testimonials. Hey, let me see how many people rated her well. Hey, let me see what others have to say about her and her company. They're going to go through that process. And then they're going to say, hey, let me see what she charges. And then they're going to compare it with 4 other companies and say, who can build my website better? What experience does she have? Etc., 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 right? So you start with attraction, but the next stage is consideration. So in the consideration stage, they're going to compare you, your brand or your product with other similar brand and products who are your competitors. So what information do you need to give them in the consideration stage? And then what information you need to give them in the buying stage, and at the end of it, after they've bought your product, what information do you need to give them to delight them so they become your brand ambassadors and go around telling other people, hey, please, if you want a website, you need to get it from Firuzan, right? So all of this requires content. Content strategy is used in demand generation, which means to attract new people to your product, your brand. It's used in sales enablement, which means when you're selling, what is the communication message you're using? And it also is used in the end for overall customer satisfaction. And in fact, 70% of marketers actively invest in content marketing. So what is content marketing? At the end of the day, content marketing is all about telling stories. And I love this quote because it so clearly tells you the power of storytelling. And Steve Jobs says the most powerful person in the world is the storyteller, because the storyteller sets the vision, the values, and the agenda of an entire generation that is to come, which is what Steve Jobs did with all of his Apple products. But if you think of it, the stories that we hear products telling us are shaping the way we see our own needs and how we buy and sell and talk about things, right? Like think about Martin Luther King. The story and the way he told it led that journey. Think about Gandhi, okay? So they are also, in a sense, anytime you tell a story, you're marketing your point of view to someone else, right? Think about what these people achieved just by what they said. And that is what you need to think about when you're telling your own story, right? Because stories, human beings thrive on stories. They love stories. We remember stories better than stats. And stories build relationships and make people care. People don't care about what you're doing. They are caring about why you're doing it. And that is where that emotion is. And stories make us feel connected to each other. Think about it. people who go together to watch a movie, right? You'll go together with a bunch of friends to watch a movie, and all of a sudden, if it's a great movie, it's gripping, there's this entire bond that you've developed and a whole bunch of conversation emerges from it. And you've now immersed yourself as part of a culture, and your 4 or 5 friends are all talking about the same thing. Because that's what story does. It binds you to the person who experiences that story with you. And stories bring us together. And I'd love to tell you a story about Jacques Privé, who is actually a French poet, and how his story changed a beggar's life. So Jacques is a poet. And as you know, poets love words, but don't make very much money. And one day he was walking along on the streets of Paris, and he sees this beggar. He sees this beggar every day, but today he decides to stop and he decides to chat. So he stops by and he pulls out his cigarette. He's smoking, not very good for health. Cigarette is injurious to health. Please don't smoke. But this is just part of the story. So he is talking to this beggar and says, "Hey, how's it going?" And the beggar turns around, and that's the first time Jacques notices that he is blind. The beggar is blind, and he has a card in his hand that says, "I'm blind." And the beggar says, "Hey, you know what? The truth is, it's not great. People don't leave me any money. I'm really struggling. I don't even have enough to eat. And it's just been a very few hard days." So Jacques feels really bad for this person who's struggling in life. And the beggar says, "Can you give me some money?" And Jacques like, "I don't have money to give you." But he says, "You know what? I can write your sign." The beggar's like, "Okay, go for it. I mean, how much worse can it get? I'm already not making any money." Okay, cool. So Jacques flips the sign over and writes a new sign and puts it in the beggar's hand and says, "Best of luck," goes on his way. Couple of days later, Jacques comes around and he's like, "Hey, how's it going?" And the guy, his face beams up and he's like, "Hey, I don't know what you wrote, but my little bag is filling up with money 3 times a day, and people are just giving me money, and I am finally not struggling." And he asked Jacques, like, "What did you write on my sign? Why are people suddenly giving me money?" And the sign reads, "It's spring, but I won't be able to see it." Or rather, spring is coming, but I won't be able to see it. And in those few words, Jacques had communicated the entire pain of this man's existence to the person passing them by. Yes, originally the sign said, "I'm blind." And that was true. It was a fact. But when people read, "Spring is coming and I won't be able to see it," automatically they were able to relate with the person. Because everybody goes through winter. Everybody knows what it feels like to wait for winter. Everybody knows what it feels like to see those first shoots of flowers coming, to feel the air, to look at the sun shining outside. That just uplifts your mood. And everybody knows what it feels like when you can't see what that would do to you. And so immediately in those 6 or 7 words, Jacques was able to relate all of this to the audience. And that was moving people to donate, to offer charity to a fellow human being. And that is the power of a story. You need to dig deep into a story and look at it and say, "Hey, what can I tell my audience?" So I want you to look at this slide, and I really need you to think about what story I'm telling you and what movie this story is from, okay? So we have a humble hero who starts very small beginnings, and then gets off on an adventure. Somehow, this hero who's leading a very boring life, all of a sudden finds themselves in an adventure. And the hero is like taken out of their comfort zone. And they don't know what they're doing on this adventure until they start receiving this training. They meet this wise old mentor, and then they go on this great big adventure and they face the bad guys. And finally, they come back home with some kind of magical power or object. Now go in the chat and you tell me what story this is. Think about what story this is. Like, which movie is this story from? Come on. It's not hard at all. I love these responses. You are so intelligent. Anyone else? Kung Fu Panda, Percy Jackson and the Olympians, all of them. That is true. I think David and Stephanie are really onto something. This is the story of every movie you see over here and every movie ever written. It is the hero journey. This is every story you've ever heard, from Harry Potter to Star Wars, and every version of Star Wars, and every version of the Hunger Games, and every version of the Matrix. It's every story in the world. And this is the basic story, and we all love it, no matter how many times we watch it, right? So how do we use this story to our benefit, right? What are the elements of the story that make it so compelling? And what do we need to do to make our stories like that? Because at the end of the day, you're the hero of your own story as well, right? And your story is also worth telling. And there are people out there waiting to listen to your story because they relate with you. So there are 4 elements of effective storytelling. The first is relatability. The second is novelty. Third is tension. And the fourth is fluency. And we're going to go through each one of them. So what does it mean to be relatable? It means that there is something familiar about that story that connects us to our past or our dreams or our values or our hopes or our roots or our culture. There is something about that story that makes it feel familiar somewhere in our mind, okay? And so I'm taking the example of this story here. And I don't know if how many of you have had a chance to see it, but if you look at all of these characters in this story, let's take the character of Louisa, the strong one, right? We all know people in our lives who are super strong, who carry the burden of the whole world on their shoulders and keep going, keep fighting the good fight, keep fighting for their friends and family and, working hard and pulling people out of issues and all of that, right? We all know somebody like, oh, I forget her name, so sad. I think it's Isabella. Is it Isabella? I think it's Isabella, who is a perfectionist. But in that perfection, she's trying to be perfect for everyone. And in that perfection, she is losing part of herself. And then Mirabelle, the protagonist, we understand her character really well as well. She's the healer, the glue that keeps the family together. And we all can connect with the abuela, I hope I'm saying it right, the grandmother, the matriarch, who is holding the family together, but at the same time has faced generational trauma and kind of passes it down. So we all know these characters and we relate with them, which is what makes the movie so relatable, right? So that is one of the most important things. Why is it the same hero story in every movie that we see? Because it keeps things relatable. It helps us connect to the story. We recognize it. We love it, right? And then there is something, there's a theory called the mere exposure theory in psychology, which means basically, if you're exposed to something long enough, you will become more inclined to like it after every exposure. So you might have noticed, okay, things like I remember when I tasted champagne for the first time, I was like, yeah, this is okay. It's not that great. why is everyone raving about champagne? It's not that great. And today I absolutely love it because I've been exposed to it multiple times, and it works according to the mere exposure theory. And all of us have experienced it, right? You'll see some fashion and you'll be like, is this the new fashion? And we don't really like it. And then suddenly you'll see all the celebrities wearing it, and then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, it looks really good, right? It happens to all of us. And that's just psychological. So any story, any message, any communication needs to be relatable, but you also need to have multiple exposure to it so it becomes familiar, right? And that works in the favor of marketeers because it's in our hands to be able to expose our target audiences to our communication. And especially if you want to teach them something, you can teach them. Suppose if you want to build a person's sensitivity towards inclusion, you keep exposing them to the concept of inclusion from various perspectives. And then all of a sudden you start looking at a whole generation that believes in inclusion, that believes in diversity, right? So that's what being relatable is all about. But then our brains want familiar things, but they also seek novelty. They crave it. It's like a brain is addicted to new things. Why? Because we have the Neanderthal brain. It's still triggered in flight, freeze, or fight, right? It's still, the brain still thinks you're in a jungle and a tiger is going to attack you. So I'm going to be alert all the time. That's how our brains are wired. So the brain is always looking for new things. So if you give the brain something new to either be scared of or either feel pleasure, the brain gets super excited and that triggers dopamine. And that rush of dopamine is what makes you feel like, yeah, I want to watch this movie. Oh, that promo looks so exciting. Or, oh, I saw that piece of chocolate cake. Oh, that's a promo, right? If you see the piece of chocolate cake, it's a promo. That looks so exciting. I want to eat it, right? So you need to be relatable, but you can be completely familiar with the story. Otherwise, it's just boring. It's the same old thing. So there needs to be twists and turns. So I saw this really, great post, which tells the story of this lady named Kiran Demla, who is actually Miss Universe in, I think there is a weightlifting Miss Universe of the world, and she is one of them. And her story was on LinkedIn. And this is how it started. Like, all she was talking about was that after marriage, she lived a monotonous life for 10 years. There's nothing wrong in her story. There are no villains. It's just that her life was super monotonous, and she cooked and cleaned for her family every day, took care of her family, and lost herself. You can see over here, there are pictures of her, before pictures of her, like she totally lost herself in her family, and then she became a really miserable human being. So her husband, twist in the story, said, why don't you go to the gym every day? Like, you like exercising, go to the gym and have fun. So she starts going to the gym. And in the gym, she discovers she's really good at exercising. So this is something that's now giving her a lot of joy. Then she's waking up at 5 in the morning and going to the gym so that she can hit the gym before she comes back and makes breakfast for her kids and her husband, etc., etc. Life goes on. Suddenly she tells her husband, I want to have my own gym. So the husband says, yes, let's have your own gym. No problem. They mortgage one of their homes. And as soon as they're about, they're just about ready to have that gym, and her father-in-law dies. Notice the twists and turns. So, when I'm reading this story, I'm like, oh, she's just getting it. Oh no, this happened. I'm like, I am with her. She's already has me in her, like, engaged so deeply, immersed in her story. Like, and then she's talking about, she has to go for a weightlifting competition. Her father-in-law has passed away. So instead of going to the gym and lifting weights every day, she, as a good daughter-in-law in an Indian household, has to perform certain duties and take care of thousands of people who've come for the funeral. And in some traditions, you can't eat non-veg when there is a death in the family. So her protein diet goes for a toss. So then she talks about how her husband is smuggling food to feed her so she can still take part in the competition. And the reader in me who's reading this is like, oh my God, I hope she gets to go for the competition. And she talks about how she makes it to the competition, but loses it the first time because, obviously. So then she goes the next year, she wins the competition. And after that, she becomes a DJ, she becomes a photographer, she becomes a gym owner, and she becomes a person with multiple talents because she tapped into one thing that makes her happy. And this is just a simple LinkedIn post. And I am sitting there immersed in this woman's story. I don't know her from anywhere, but it's triggering so much dopamine for me. I'm totally hooked onto this woman. And in terms of, I want to know if she succeeds or not, right? So this is what a story will do for you. If it's familiar enough, so it's familiar enough for me, we are culturally similar. She comes from India, I do too. It's very familiar, her background, her values, all of that. I understand all her issues, but at the same time, I'm rooting for her. And that's what a good story is all about. And then the other part of the story is to create tension. So any great story has a gap between what there is and what the character wants to be. So just like I was talking about Kiran wanted to be this amazing body builder and this Miss Universe in the bodybuilding competition, but she wasn't there yet. And so there's a delta. Every great story has a delta. Every good brand story has a delta. You see a problem, you want to take your customer from point A to point B with your brand as a bridge, but you're not there yet. And that tension is what makes the story interesting. And every time you tell that story, the storyteller bridges that gap and takes you on a journey. All right, you were using, for example, this, I don't know, you were using this detergent that, was okay, but not giving you great whiteness in your clothes. And all of a sudden, we worked with this in the chemical, in our laboratories and produced this amazing new detergent for you. You see these ads, right? And then what happened? And then now it's also good for nature. It's also good for pets. It's also good for your skin and this, that, and the other. And finally, you close the gap at the end. You're taking the viewer on a journey, just like we go on a journey in The Hobbit with Frodo. He starts off as this really innocent little guy who goes on a journey with 12 dwarfs and ends up becoming a warrior. And then he keeps doing that in The Hobbit 2, in The Hobbit 3, and then in Hobbit 4, and as many Hobbits that will come along. So that tension is really important. Last but not the least, fluency. So when you capture and hold someone's attention, it has to happen in the first few seconds. Take difficult concepts and break them down and explain them really super simply, and keep it simple when you're talking to people. So when you're talking to people, head into the story right away. 58% of viewers are more likely to be engaged with you if within the first 3 seconds of telling a story, you're right into it. If you have a character or a people presence, 133% people are more likely to stay with you because that emotional intensity and hook keeps them. And then if your content is topical, 32% of people will stick with you longer. And of course, you need to have text and subtitles because you're trying to communicate. If you're communicating via video, you're trying to give them all the information, and you give it to them in multimodal ways so they can see it, they can hear it, they can take it all in, right? And so those are 4 of the great ways of telling a universal story. And this is the universal storytelling format. And what I've done here is break down every stage of this story and attach questions to it. So if you look at it, you will see some questions at every stage. And what I'd love for you to do is take 10 minutes of reflection time and think about your venture and write that story for your venture, so that when you leave this session today, you have a rough draft of your story. How was your life prior to your business idea? Like, how did you get that idea? What situation occurred? What convinced you that you should do this business? Did you have fears or mindsets of attitudes that stopped you from going into that business? Then did you meet a wise mentor or someone with insight who, inspired you, showed you how to take the next steps? Were you challenged by situations? Did you go into a space which is like an inner cave where you started to prepare and run your business? And what were the ordeals or challenges that you faced, and what came out at the other end? And how did you come back with that magic product or service, right? Think of this as the universal storytelling format and start putting bullets down as answers to each of these questions, so that when you leave today, you have the makings of a great brand story, right? So we'll take a 10-minute break for you to do that. And it's a reflective exercise, so everyone can just, take your time to work on it, and then we'll share when we're back, okay? I'm going to keep these questions on over here so you can see them. We'll take another 5 minutes. And then I'd love for some of you to share your story. And 3 more minutes, then we'll wrap this up. All right, let's wrap this up. So, anyone want to share their story very quickly, or their experience of writing a few bullet points for their story? I can't see the chat. Would anyone like to share? And if not, that's all right as well, because I know it's not always easy to share your story. That's the toughest part. So if you feel comfortable, that'd be great. If not, I'm sorry, did I hear someone unmute?
If you want, I could share my story.
That'd be great, Alex. Please do.
Okay, so hopefully I did this correctly. So to start off, I was just a young, I guess, business student coming from a cash-strapped household. So when I came across a picture on Pinterest of a machine that refilled a detergent bottle, and it was out of Europe. I think it was Austria. And after seeing that kind of machine, it made me question, why is this not like a thing? Like, this makes no sense how we are kind of using the system today. And so I couldn't move past that, I guess, that image. And so then I took a entrepreneurship class, and my professor pushed me to continue this idea, which was very encouraging and kind of gave me like that breath of fresh air. But then after the class was done, he actually changed his mind on the business idea and told me it's not feasible and that it would never happen. And even though it wasn't even my number one option as like an idea, even though it was always stuck in my head, after he told me I couldn't do it, I had to do it, right? So I decided to take his complaints against the idea and solve them, which was mainly the inconvenience and people bringing their containers back to refill them. So I decided to fix that by putting the machines where people live, so they don't have to go to a store and do all that. And so, yeah, and currently, you know, I feel like I've solved those issues, and that's kind of where I'm at. That's kind of where the story is at right now.
Well, that's a great story, because as you can tell, you know, you were going along living this life, and then one day all of a sudden, bam, you're like, wait, this is revolutionary. Why hasn't somebody done this already? Because it could save somebody so much money and time, and also save the planet, right? Why isn't someone doing it? And then you thought you found a wise mentor to help you. And then boom, the mentor turns into the evil villain who tells you, no, you can't do this. Right? So you see, it does follow the same format. And when you tell this story, you must tell it with more oomph and more excitement. It's like, and your dreams were crushed, but you realize, no, I'm not going to stop here. I'm going to keep persevering because this needs to be done. And then you came up with the product and now you're getting it out there, so on and so forth. And I know a lot of people will find that relatable because we all struggle with someone who said, no, you can't do this, right? All of us know that feeling, right? So that was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you, Steph.
Farazan, I think you muted yourself by mistake.
Yes, I did. Thank you. I'm sensitized to time. So I'm going to read Stephanie's story for myself and allow Dana to move on with her part, okay? But thank you very much, Stephanie, and I'm going to respond in the chat to you. So mic is all yours, Dana.
I'm on mute. Okay, hopefully everyone can hear me now. Perfect. Just gonna move my screen around here. Okay, so I had to say, Farazan, the stories that you told were just so compelling. I wanted to know what Kieran was gonna do next. And then, I mean, you're an amazing storyteller. And then Alex, when you told your story about your business, your startup story, I just, made me think, actually, that professor that told you it wasn't going to work, that professor actually gave you some really great ideas and how to make things even better. So it's such a great story. And so thank you for sharing that. And Farazan, thank you also for, I want to know what happened to Kieran. So I'm gonna have to follow up with you after. And Alex, you'll have to share with the group too on how things go, because definitely such a compelling story that I think really will interest a lot of people and people can connect with. And, that whole idea of connection is so important. And so we think about social media, and yes, there's tons of different platforms. We can go and post great content and images, but at the end of the day, we're trying to attract a community. We're trying to get into a community. We're trying to connect with the community. And how do you connect with your community? You need to know who that community is, and we'll talk about that as we move forward. So just at a very high level, I wanted to talk about the key components of developing a social strategy. And there's lots of different components. We're only going to cover a couple of platforms today, but it's really to start getting the juices flowing for you guys to start thinking about how can I take advantage of all the different platforms and a social strategy as well. So we've already talked about our audience, right? You guys are developing who your audience is, or maybe you've already developed who your audience is, like Alex did. We all have a clear picture of that mom. And so in terms of your business goals, depending on where you are in your journey, this has got to be part of, you don't just want to dive into a social strategy and start posting ad hoc, because the fact is that never works. And as Farazan said, you want to make sure there's consistency with your content, whether it's images or logos. This is all about that integrated marketing strategy. And we really got to think about that. You want to make sure you might not use all of the platforms in the same way, but it's got to be integrated in terms of look, feel, how you communicate, how you engage. So, you might be tempted just to go ad hoc and start posting. You want to think before you actually post. And that whole idea that it's really not about the quantity, it is about the quality, which is very true. Because remember, there's possibly other competitors just like you, maybe direct or indirect, but you want to, once you get engagement from your community, from your audience, you want them to stay engaged. You don't want them to all of a sudden start to unfollow and go somewhere else, right? It's hard to get those followers. It's hard to get that engagement. So that's why you really have to think about the quality versus the quantity. And you want to make sure too, and we'll talk about this as we move forward, but once you do get those followers or you do get that engagement, you want to make sure that you can actually engage in a meaningful conversation if the engagement allows you to. So it's a lot of work to have a social strategy. It's a lot of work, but the payoff is huge. And the thing is too, you want to, and Firuza had talked about this, about ensuring that you can test different platforms and different types of content. And yes, it's got to be an integrated strategy, but you might find content on a particular platform may not work as well as another platform. And that's why this monitoring and measuring is super important. Oftentimes I hear from marketers all the time is, oh, I don't have time for this. I'm too busy. I have no time to monitor and measure to see how I'm doing. And that is probably one of the biggest mistakes you could possibly do. Okay, so just that's that one thing. It's so easy just to put that aside, is the monitoring and measuring, but that's the only way that you're going to be able to make very good informed decisions on how to move forward, on how to pivot. So, okay, I'm just going to move on. Just in the interest of time, I'll start moving quickly. So we think about, we talked the whole idea of storytelling and connecting and being very relatable all relates back to this idea of business to human marketing. Remember, at the end of the day, yes, you have an audience, however large the size of your market is, you're trying to connect on an individual level. Obviously, you can't connect one-to-one. It's like that's impossible. But you want to make people feel as though you're connecting on an individual level. And you want to make your content and your story relatable. So what Alex had said, I thought was interesting, that growing up, maybe finances were a little bit tight, and so these types of things connect with a certain audience, and so and he's developing that story. So the same idea, whether you're developing your brand story or any other related content, you want to make sure it's going to connect directly with your audience, that they're going to buy into it, and then they're going to want to engage, and then they're going to be really hungry to see more. So that whole idea of gaining that meaningful engagement is the whole concept of business to human marketing. We're all humans at the end of the day. You think about how you interact with brands, what drives you and what doesn't drive you. So you want to make sure that you get into this mindset of the customer. Remember, it's not about you, it's about them. Always think about that, because what might interest you might not actually interest your customer. So try to take yourself out of it and put yourself in the mindset of that customer. Even if you have to remind yourself, you have a one-pager that reminds yourself of who your ideal customer is, just as a reminder, keep that on the side of your desk, because it is very easy for us, as business owners, as marketers, to actually start to think about what we would do instead of what our customers would do. You might not be a customer of your product. It's possible. And then just as we communicate, that idea of really simplifying our communications, because remember, you're so deep inside your product or your service. You're so deep inside of it, but the average individual who is your ideal customer may not be as deep in it. So you have to that's why you have to take yourself out of it. You simplify communications to make sure each and every person understands what you're trying to communicate. Now, as we move on outside of those sort of high-level social strategy structure, you want to think about where your audience lives. So as you can see, there's so many platforms. Some of these platforms may not even be around anymore. It doesn't matter. There are tons of platforms out there. It doesn't mean that every single platform is going to be where your audience hangs out or where they live or where they like to learn. So you have to that's why doing the background research and understanding who your audience are, how they're engaging in social or any other type of content is super important. So when we look at when we look at the different platforms that are increasing over time, and we have 2021 data here, but you can see, so the platform, so we see Instagram is by it, far outnumber some of the other platforms. However, it is starting to, if you look to see at the platforms that are actually growing, and you can over here, over here, you can see TikTok is actually growing at a pretty fast rate. And so although Instagram is definitely ahead of TikTok, but it's on the decline. We don't know how far it's going to decline. It's a pretty great platform for brands, but you can see, and this probably doesn't surprise you, TikTok is on the increase. So what I wanted to ensure too, although we saw that data, okay, TikTok is growing, but TikTok might not be the right platform for your product or your service. That's something that you have to identify. Now, when we look at social, there's some rules to social engagement, and we oftentimes, you might want to jump in if you're selling a physical product or even a service, you might want to communicate the discount or the bundles that you're selling. But remember, this is a rule of thumb. You want to make sure that your posts are very engaging. They're not too salesy focused. So if you think of as a rule of thumb, 80% of your posts should really engage, can inform, can, even entertain your audience, and 20% is really about kind of doing hardcore promoting your brand and offering and being very sales focused. You don't want to turn people off by every post just being very salesy. Okay, so the role of marketing, we're looking at influencing and we're looking at educating. So just think about that as a rule of thumb, the 80-20 rule. And remember, social media can be about conversation. So it's not only, you communicating out and educating and entertaining, but there is that conversation aspect. And if you start to look at maybe some of your competitors, or maybe even some of the big brands, or even some of the smaller brands, you'll start to see what type of content actually creates engagement and conversations amongst the followers. And so you want to make sure there's when you develop the social strategies, there's so many different components, and it can become overwhelming at times. And we'll talk about how to make it not overwhelming in a couple of slides towards the end of the workshop. But it's not only about creating and developing and executing, but it's also about the monitoring. So monitoring sort of any of those indirect mentions. What are people saying about your brand, your content? Are they liking it? Are they sharing it? You want to make sure that you're staying on top of some trending events, because a great conversation can start with, if it's appropriate, can start with a topic that is currently trending, but you have to make sure that it is appropriate and aligns with your brand. And another way to create conversation, which I've done a lot in the past and really works, it also helps with setting that social strategy and that cadence, is about creating a theme. So you may have themes of the month, or a theme of the month, where content and what you're delivering is solely focused on, on a particular topic. Or you may have a particular day in the week that you might want to focus on a particular theme. So you're getting your audience to know what to expect. There's that level of expectation. The only thing is, once you start to get into that, the theme of the month or a particular day, like thought leadership Thursday, you have to maintain that cadence. And so as long as you can maintain that cadence, then, it's definitely something to think about. But so you got to think about what your goals are, what you have time for, and you sort of bring that together as well. And the reason why I bring time in, because, as an entrepreneur, you're pulled in so many different places, and there's only so much you can do. So you want to do each piece really well and be committed to it, but don't sort of, I don't stretch yourself too much if you want to think about the long term. So as we move in terms of the social strategy, and you don't, so we talked about, okay, we don't want to actually just create some ad hoc content and start throwing it out there and see what sticks. Well, marketing is not a perfect science. And I think you guys probably already know that already, right? It's a lot of tweaking. It's a lot of testing, learning. It's this constant battle between and back and forth between test and learn. So it's something that you have to monitor. But a couple things that I want to make sure that you also think about is when you're developing your social strategy, there might be times of the day when you post where you get tons of engagement, and there might be other times a day where you feel like, oh my goodness, I'm getting no engagement. Maybe it's, you have to start to think about time zones. Maybe if it's, you're targeting moms are on Instagram, before 7 a.m. and in between 2 and 4, or after 10 when their kids go to sleep. It sounds kind of funny thinking like, oh, I really have to schedule my post at a certain time, but your audience will be online at a certain time and be ready to engage at a certain time. And so you want to think about that. And it's that other element in your monitoring and measuring to actually think about. So I'm just looking at time. So I'm going to move a little bit quickly, but I do want to show you this example of this example of Spotify. They have this campaign called Define Your Fields, and I'm going to show you in a second just one of their posts. But it was real. Well, actually, I'll show you the post first, and then we'll go into it. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of different ones that I can show you, but this one's just 12 seconds. I'll show you a few of them, and then we'll talk about it.
My flame cannot burn out. I needed to keep saying that to myself. That's what that song means to me. Overcoming things and feeling like the world is at my fingertips.
There's so many of them here. Let's see, we'll watch this one too.
If I can listen to music, I'll try and listen to it. It just gives me good energy. The injury just came out of nowhere. I'm either going to be the same player. You have to believe yourself. In the physio room, there's always music going on. The other songs where I'll get up and go crazy with it and just like enjoy it. Just stop it. Stop.
Okay. So I just want to give you an example of a campaign by Spotify. So they had this, so they posted on Instagram as well as YouTube. And this campaign was focused on ages 16 to 24. It was really to empower Gen Zs and to give them the ability to express themselves. And you'll see there is, if you look at the campaign, they highlight artists and athletes, models. It's really about just celebrating that journey of, the 16 to 24-year-old and how music has inspired them to do something great. And so you can see, like, I mean, we probably could have watched a few of these because they are actually quite inspired. They're short little snippets, short little videos. You can see that they're very laser focused on Gen Z. Very focused on how music, they discuss how music makes them feel, how music is inspiring. So just wanted to give you an example of how the platform, how this platform was used to actually share. When you think about it, it's a pretty interesting campaign, right? They had their own hashtag. They had stories, this whole idea of telling stories like Ruzen had talked about. You can see it doesn't have to be long form stories. It can be very short form, which is what Spotify was able to do. So we're just going touch on a couple of platforms just in the interest of time, and because I wanted to give you an idea of, okay, so how can we use every platform? Not every platform should be used in the same way. And so you want to make sure that you actually, first of all, where is your audience kind of living or hanging out? Where is that community? Remember, you have to go to where your community is. They're not going to go to you. So if we think about Facebook, Facebook is such an amazing platform. You have millions of followers. There's access to analytics. You can gain such great engagement from your audience. You can have images and stories and status updates. You have to just make sure, although Facebook is a very powerful platform, and you can also laser target your audience, but it might not be right for all businesses. And so when I was in B2B, and sort of in the technology space, Facebook was not one of my platforms that I used in order to market our business, because it just didn't make sense. Our audience wasn't there. So then we look at Instagram, and Instagram, as you know, is just such an amazing platform. It's extremely visually oriented. You can have very short form content. You can have videos. It's extremely engaging. It's easy to engage. Especially from a brand perspective, we see a lot of brands have grown through Instagram. And so it gives you that ability to share long form and short form content, but it's also very visual. And so, a lot of these platforms do overlap with how you can use them, right? You can have video on Instagram just like you can on Facebook. And so, but you need to think about where is your audience living and figuring out where are they engaging, where is your community, to determine what platform to actually use. And then we move on to YouTube. I mean, YouTube is more for the younger audience, 18 to 49-year-olds. It's a great way to, it's essentially the largest search engine, but it's a great way to help enhance your SEO. And so we've also seen that there's been very high sort of conversion rate on YouTube. Now, the great thing is it's a good way in order to educate about your brand, whether it's maybe there's a video testimonial, maybe you have a behind the scenes, maybe you need to do information videos on how to use your product. So you want to think about, it's not just about promoting your brand. We have to think about different ways to engage. And so we use video in different ways than we use images on Instagram, right? I mean, we can use video on Instagram as well, but you have to think about what is the purpose of the content that you're creating and what is the purpose of the platform? How do I want my followers to engage with me on a particular platform? And then Twitter is such a great platform. We often see a lot of technology companies launching maybe new products, even new services, new updates to a particular platform. So it is, and it's also very heavily used for social customer service. I use that for my customer service team when I managed that when I was in marketing. It was a great way to connect with your customers to give them updates. So if we had a system fail, a network failure, our customers were driven to Twitter to get up to the minute updates on the progress and when they were going to be up and running again. So it's not only for using product updates or launches, but it's also a really great tool for social customer service and something to think about if your product requires customer service. It takes off the it makes your community, it enhances the communication with your existing customers. And the other thing too, what you can use in Twitter as well is just, another way to engage with your audience outside of social customer service and product launches, but just engagement in terms of really quick polls, really quick snippets of, educating your audience. It's short, it's sweet. You can only use 280 characters, but sometimes, when you think about our current attention spans and all the content that we have to read, it's a really great platform just to get your message out and to connect with your audience, if your audience is on this platform. So, okay, we'll do this activity, and we'll maybe skip the next one, because we want to leave some time for questions and answers, but just throw this in the chat. So here's a scenario. You're a beverage company. You're launching a new beverage, and you're launching a new low-calorie antioxidant drink that includes probiotics. There's 3 fruit flavors that includes mango and strawberry, pineapple, mango, blueberry, pomegranate. I'm getting thirsty already. So what channel would you use to promote and why? So if you could just pop that into the chat. What channels would you use? What social channels would you use to promote your drink? And this is all kind of, hypothetical. Instagram, yeah, Stephanie. Instagram video pictures can be displayed quickly. Exactly, can show the YouTube and Instagram and Facebook and Instagram. Yeah, thank you everyone for responding to this. Exactly, those are all great platforms in order to launch this drink. Sometimes you have to, the way it was described here, it's very visual, right? So you want to find a platform where people engage from a visual perspective. Instagram is great, and TikTok as well. Yeah, you're right, Hannah, because you can use short videos. Exactly. So, but you have to, so what I wanted to get you guys to move towards is having to think about, although I didn't give you that much information about the product, but you had to think about, okay, what platform would be the most appropriate to launch this product and why? Always think about that why. Okay, so I'm going to skip over this, but I do want you to come back on your own just to look at these questions, just because in the interest of time, we want to get to the Q&As. But I want you to think about, okay, so now that you've gone through, we've been learning about, and we will do a wrap up, but storytelling and audience, and we've discussed some social platforms and what they're best used for. And you want to think about, okay, so start to think about, and you might want to jot it down, what platforms would be, what platforms would help you further engage with your audience for your product or your service. And sometimes you might not 100% know, even though you've done all of your research, but you've got to test it. And testing, and that's why monitoring and measuring is so important. So as I move on quickly into the next phase, just a couple more, we just have a little bit more to go through, but I want to make sure that you understand that content is, I mean, this is said so well, content marketing is a commitment, it's not a campaign, and it is. We might have campaigns where, like the Find Your Feels campaign for Spotify, but overall, when you look at your business, it is a commitment that you want to make sure that you stick to. So because you almost want to train your audience, if you have a very deep following, you want to train your audience to know what to expect. So if you're doing Thought Leadership Thursdays, you need to really think about making sure that you don't disappoint. So a couple of things you want to make sure. So we've talked, social listening is this idea of really monitoring your audience. How are they engaging? What platforms are they using? But also monitoring your competitors. We talked a lot about our audience, but your competitors are going to give you some really great ideas, whether they're direct or indirect, but they're going to give you some really great ideas on the types of posts that gain engagement, whether they're using video or whether they're using content, short form or long form content. So make sure you take the time to really investigate and assess what your competitors are doing. And then you can optimize your content in so many different ways. It doesn't mean you always have to create your own content, original content. You might want to create content that you think your audience would enjoy or would interact with. You always have to give credit to the content creator, but you could think about that. Curating content is okay as well. And then there's, some other ideas that you might want to think about, that I'll leave this up to you just to get the juices flowing. But just the key thing is, once you've identified your audience, making that emotional connection and what's going to trigger that emotional connection. So in terms of, and I hope I didn't scare you in terms of making sure that you're committed to creating content and to posting on a regular basis, but a couple of tips that I wanted to share with you was, first, just creating a content calendar. If you go, and this is, this was all marketers should use content calendars. This is something that I always live by and my team always live by, is essentially just, and if you Google content calendars, you'll see all sorts of different formats and templates that will be helpful. But essentially, it's a planning your content over a period of time and identifying what the content is and what platform you're going to be posting on. So this will really help you sort of avoid, to get out of that sort of ad hoc posting, but really be very committed and very focused on what you want to deliver to your audience. And you can schedule your posts as well. So there's lots of different free tools that you can use, like HubSpot or Hootsuite or later.com. There are lots of free versions that you can use in order to plan out your content and schedule it as well. And just another key thing too, is that when you focus on, developing your content, you want to have a bank of this evergreen content where you can pull, if you're struggling to figure out, okay, I don't have enough content, you want to make sure you have content that will be impactful at any time. So there doesn't have to be a perfect day. There doesn't have to be a perfect time. It's called evergreen content. You can post it, today, and then you can post it in 5 months. It's nothing to say that you can't post the same type of content. You just got to make sure that you use it in the right time. So that's essentially what evergreen content is. So here's just an example of, you guys can come back and look at it on your own, of a content calendar. This is not the content calendar that works for everyone, but what you can see is it was created in Excel essentially by platform. Oftentimes and you can see the types of information that is important. You might want to shift it and plan your content calendar by actually the calendar year or themes. So you have to do what's right for your business, but definitely it will be a huge help as you start to venture into enabling yourself socially. And so, Dr. Fruzen.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Dana. That was really helpful. And in fact, I was taking some notes on my phone while you were talking. So thanks for refreshing some of that content for me. So to wrap all of this up, what I'd love to tell you is that one of the key things that all content marketers learn is that the more content you give, the more people want to buy from you. And why is that? So I'm going to answer Stephanie's question in the chat as well with this point. So Stephanie said, what kind of conversations? So for instance, the more content you can give in conversations about your product or your brand and the pain points it addresses or the benefits of using it and the stories of customers, you can continue building that conversation over a period of time, right? So if I'm not mistaken, Stephanie, your venture is called iPods, right? So you could start building a community around iPods by talking about or growing awareness about iPods itself, because not too many people know about it. And then you could have content that addresses people who have it, and you can have content that addresses caretakers of people who have it. So that's two separate kinds of content. And then you could have content around pain management or other kind of management systems, but you could also have like just informative content, things that people just need to know when you have iPods. You could have engaging content where people can actually write their own stories and share with you, and that user generated content can be used back. And as you continue to evolve with this community and talk to them every day, and the more information you put out there, the more people learn about you, who you are as a human being, the kind of work you do. They become intimate with you on a digital platform. So even though they don't know you one-on-one, they feel like they know you. They feel like they know what you stand for, what your values are, how you work, and then they feel like they can trust you. And when they feel like they can trust you, then they want to buy from you. And that is what it means by having conversations, and what it means when you say you make sales superfluous. Marketing needs to be so powerful. The stories that you tell need to be so evocative that it really connects with the audience on a very elemental level. You know, it touches their heart. So for some action items, some takeaways from this workshop, what can you do? Use the material in these slides to write your own story. Build that story for yourself. Figure out your audience persona. Use Dana's slides to actually make that audience segment, who they are, psychographics, demographics, etc., etc. Identify where your audience lives digitally and in the real world, just like Dana explained. What platform are they on? Where are they talking? What groups are they part of? And then develop content from insights that you have, generated by sharing your story, but also by understanding your audience persona, right? Drive that marketing machine or that marketing car with the engine of content, power that car, and get yourself organized, because this is a lot of work. Who are you kidding? Like, big companies have entire teams doing this kind of work, right? So as entrepreneurs, we can't do everything. So get organized. Keep a day to just do your post for the next 30 days. Build a content calendar like Dana showed you. Use marketing tools, like she said, automation tools like Hootsuite, HubSpot, MailChimp. All of them have a free version. So you don't have to pay for any of those, right? And then go tell your story to the world and tell them about the amazing stuff you're doing, and find the people who connect with you and who need you and your product and service, and just go flourish. That's what we'd say, right? So those are the takeaways from this session today. And we have a few more minutes. And if you have any questions, the both of us are here.
I have two questions. Do either of you know of any platforms that allows you to schedule when you're posting your content? So if you have pre-made content that allows you to schedule it, but let's say your birthday is on a certain day and you want to every year use the same post, can you schedule multiple years out?
So schedule content to be posted on social multiple years in advance?
Correct.
There are platforms that will allow you to do that, but those will be paid versions. The free versions usually allow you only a certain number of posts.
Okay, so the paid versions, but do you know which ones those are?
Yeah, you can use Hootsuite, HubSpot, Buffer. There are multiple such tools available.
Okay.
And those are just three. There are many more, like,
So many.
Yeah.
One of my students actually used, she actually learned this from one of my students. I mean, in class, we and in industry, like some bigger companies will use Hootsuite and HubSpot, and the free versions are amazing. But there was one that I haven't discovered yet myself, but it's called later.com.
Later,
And yeah, and my students said it was absolutely amazing. So I don't know, just a thought. You may want to just check it out, but there are so many to sift through. So maybe start with those.
So true. Later is very good for Instagram.
Okay. And then the other question is, do you know of a video platform where I can post longer videos that are up to like 2 to 3 hours in length, where there are no commercials?
You can choose to post those on YouTube's, and you can post them on YouTube or Vimeo, and you can tell them no commercials, and it'll be for free.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? I see Hannah. You're up. No, I thought you were muted, but you're unmuted, but you're not. Okay, good. Any other questions? Okay, so it looks like we don't have any more questions. So I just want to say thank you so much to Dana for being amazing. I loved presenting with you, and a big thank you to Besma, Marisol, and Sanjana as well.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for all of you that came to listen and learn, and your commitment to, you know, really educating yourself and growing your businesses. So it made our experience even that much better.
That's so true. So
Bruce, and it was so much fun actually presenting with you today. So
thank you. Thank
real
you.
treat.
Oh, I see there's a hand up. Sana, did you wish to say something?
Hi, yeah, I have a really quick question. So, for my startup, we're in a very tight budget, and something that we're working on right now is our marketing. But we're a very small team, and not all of us are like good at marketing, so it's like a real struggle. But one thing we were considering was, would you recommend hiring like a freelance marketer? And just, you know, put in that budget, even though we're just newly starting our marketing, and that's like our basic, like through social media, we're reaching out to people? Or would you just say, wait out and, you know, familiarize with yourself with digital marketing, and it may take some more time, but at the end of the day, you're better for it, I guess?
Did you want to say something, Dana?
Yeah, I mean, I can, you know, it's obviously it all depends on your budget as well, and the stage in your business. And so if you're a brand new venture, you know, you want to make sure you have the fundamentals of your business first. And so if you've sort of created the fundamentals and that sort of platform, then I would say, okay, if you start thinking, you could start thinking about bringing someone else on to support you, but you don't want to bring someone else on to support you and you spend all that money without making sure that you really built the fundamentals of your business and you have that rock solid. I would say, I mean, not knowing that much about your business, but just, I would say, you know, think about that and start with the building blocks, and you want to just make sure you're using your money wisely. So, you know,
I totally agree. If you're bootstrapped and you're making decisions based on a certain budget, then the first thing that you want to put your money in is building that business. And that means doing everything else either yourself or getting some help. And, you know, there's so much help out there. There are so many things, like so many little workshops you can join, you know, just for specific channels. You can book time with, you know, you can book office hours with me if you like, for more ideas, if you're part of Social Impact Catalyst or part of the community. There are people who will help you as an entrepreneur. Whatever you can do for free, do that for free first. And don't be afraid of marketing, because you know what, you can't make mistakes. And if you're not ashamed of your videos from 6 months ago, then you started marketing too late. The rule of thumb is every 6 months when you look back at your marketing, you should feel ashamed and you should be, yeah, I'm so much better now. So that's how marketing works anyway. So put yourself out there and don't be afraid. That's what I'd say.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I would like to thank both Farazan and Dana for this amazing session. It was really, really very insightful, and even I learned a lot. And thank you so much for taking your time and being here today. As I have left the session feedback form, the link to the session feedback form in the chat, I would request you all to please fill it. And I would request the SIC participants to stay back for a moment. And if the others don't have any questions, they're free to leave.
Right. Thank you so much, everyone. It was lovely spending time with you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much, Farazan and Dana.
Thank you. Bye.